Hi, I'm Lily. Today I'm going to read you the story Roalddal Matilda chapter 9. Let's read it. The parents. Here it is. The parents. When Miss Honey emerged from the headmistress' study, most of the children were outside in the playground. Her first move was to go round to the various teachers who taught the science class and borrow from them a number of textbooks, books on geometry, French, English, literature, and the like. Then she sought out and called her into the classroom. There is no point, she said, in you sitting in class doing nothing while I'm teaching the rest of the form, the 2 times table and how to spell cat and the rat and the mouse. So during each lesson, I shall give you one of these textbooks to study. At the end of the lesson, you can come up to me with your questions if you have any, and I shall try to help you. How does that sound? Thank you, Miss Honey, Matilda said. That sounds fine. I'm sure, Miss Honey said, that we'll be able to get you moved into a much higher form later on, but for the moment the headmistress wishes you to stay where you are. Very well, Miss Honey, Matilda said. Thank you so much for getting those books for me. What a nice child she is, Miss Honey thought. I don't care what her father said about her. She seems very quiet and gentle to me, and not a bit stuck up in spite of her brilliance. In fact, she hardly seems aware of it. So when the class reassembled, Matilda went to her desk and began to study a textbook on geometry which Miss Honey had given her. The teacher kept half one eye on her all the time and noticed that the child very soon became deeply absorbed in the book. She never glanced upon during the entire lesson. Miss Honey, meanwhile, was making another decision. She was deciding that she would go herself and have a secret talk with Matilda's mother and father as soon as possible. She simply refused to let the matter rest where it was. The whole thing was ridiculous. She couldn't believe the parents were totally unaware of their daughter's remarkable talents. After all, Mr. Wormwood was a successful motor car dealer, so she presumed that he was a fairly intelligent man himself. In any event, parents never underestimated the abilities of their own children. Impossible for a teacher to convince the proud father or mother that their beloved offspring was a complete nitwit. Miss Honey felt confident that she would have no difficulty in convincing Mr. and Mr. Wormwood. The Matilda. Mr. and Mrs. Wormwood, the Matilda was something very special indeed. The trouble was going to be to stop them from getting over enthusiastic. And now Miss Honey's hopes began to expand even further. She started wondering whether permission might not be sought from the parents for her to give private teaching to Matilda after school. The prospect of coaching a child as bright as this appealed enormously to her professional instinct as a teacher, and suddenly she decided that she would go and call on Mr. and Mrs. Wormwood that very evening. She would go fairly late, between 9 and 10, when Matilda was sure to be in bed. And that is precisely when she did. Having got the others from the school course, Miss Honey set out to walk from her own home to the Wormwood's house shortly after 9. She found the house in a pleasant street, where each smallest building was separated from its neighbors by a bit of garden. It was a modern brick house that could not have been cheap to buy, and the name on the gate said cozy nook. Noisy cook might have been better, Miss Honey thought. She has given to playing with words in the way. She walked up the path and rang the bell, and while she stood waiting, she could hear the television blaring inside. The door was opened by a small, ready-looking man with a thin, ratty mustache who was wearing a sports coat that had an orange and red stripe in the material. Yes, he said, peering out at Miss Honey. If you're selling raffle tickets, I don't want any. I'm not, Miss Honey said, and please forgive me for butting in on you like this. I'm Matilda's teacher at school, and it is important I have a word with you and your wife. Got into trouble already, has she? Mr. Wormer said, blocking the doorway. Well, she's your responsibility from now on. You will have to deal with her. She's in no trouble at all, Miss Honey said. I have come with good news about her. Quite starting now, Mr. Wormer. Do you think I might come in a few minutes and talk to you about Matilda? We are right in the middle of watching one of our favorite programs, Mr. Wormer said. This is most inconvenient. Why don't you come back some other time? Miss Honey began to lose patience. Mr. Wormwood, she said, if you think some rotten TV program is more important than your daughter's future, then you ought to be a parent. Then you ought not to be a parent. Why don't you switch the darn thing off and listen to me? They shook Mr. Wormwood. He was not used to being spoken to in this way. He peered carefully at the slim feral woman. He stood resolutely out of the porch. Oh, very well then, he snapped. Come on in and let's get it over with, Miss Honey stepped briskly inside. Mrs. Wormwood isn't going to thank you for this, the man said as he led her into the sitting room, where a large platinum blonde woman was gazing rapturiously at the TV screen. Who is it? The woman said, not looking around. Some school teacher, Mr. Wormwood said. She says she's got to talk us about Matilda. He closed the TV and turned down the sound, but left the picture on the screen. Don't do that, Harry, Miss Wormwood cried. Willard is just about to propose to Angelia. You can still watch it while we're talking, Mr. Wormwood said. This is Matilda's teacher. She says she's got some sort of news to give us. My name is Jennifer Honey, Miss Honey said. How do you do, Miss Wormwood? Mrs. Wormwood glared at her and said, What's the trouble then? Nobody invited Miss Honey to sit down, so she chose a chair and sat down anyway. This, she said, was your daughter's first day at school. We know that, Mrs. Wormwood said, already about missing a program. Is that all you came to tell us? Miss Honey stared hard into the other woman's wet gray eyes, and she allowed the silence and hang in the air until Mr. Wormwood became uncomfortable. Do you wish me to explain why I came? She said. Get on with it then, Mrs. Wormwood said. I'm sure you know, Miss Honey said, that children in the bottom class at school are not expected to able to read or spell or juggle with the numbers when they first arrived. 5-year-olds cannot do that, but Matilda can do it all, and if I am to believe her, I wouldn't. Mrs. Wormwood said she was still ready at losing the sound on the TV. Was she lying down? Miss Honey said, when she told me that nobody taught her to multiply or to read. Did either of you teach her? Teach her what? Mr. Wormwood said. To read books, Miss Honey said. Perhaps you did teach her. Perhaps she was lying. Perhaps she have shelves full of books all over the house. I wouldn't know. Perhaps you're both great readers. Of course we read, Mr. Wormwood said. Don't be so deaf. I read the article and the model from cover to cover every week. The child has already written extraordinary numbers of books, Miss Honey said. I was simply trying to find out if she came from a family that loved good literature. We don't hoard with book reading, Mr. Wormer said. You can't make a living from sitting on your fanny and reading storybooks. You don't keep them in the house. I see, Miss Honey said. Well, all I came to tell you was Matilda has a brilliant mind, but I expect you knew that already. Of course I knew. She could read, the mother said. She spent her life up in her room, buried in some silly books. But does it intrigue you, Miss Honey said, that a little five-year-old child is reading long adult novels by Dickens and Hemingway? Doesn't that make you jump up and jump down with excitement? Not particularly, the mother said. I'm not in favor of blue stocking girls. A girl should think about making herself look attractive so she can get a good husband later on. Looks is more important than books, Miss Hunky. The name is Honey, Miss Honey said. Hunky. Now look at me, Mrs. Warmer said. Then look at you. You chose books. I chose looks. Miss Honey looked at the plain, plump person with a smug, quiet, pudding face who was sitting across the room. What did you say? She asked. I said you chose books, and I chose looks, Mrs. Wormer said. And who's finished up the better of me? Of me, of course. I'm sitting pretty in a nice house with a successful business, and you're left slaving away teaching a lot of nasty little children the ABC. Quite right, Sugar Plum, Mr. Wormer said, casting a look of such simpering sleepiness and at his wife it'd have a maid, a cat said. Miss Honey decided that if she was going to get anywhere with these people, she must not lose her temper. I haven't told you all of it yet, she said. Matilda, so far as I can gather at this early stage, is also a kind of mathematical genius. She can multiply complication figures in her head like lightning. What's the point of that when you can buy a calculator, Mr. Wormer said. A girl doesn't get a man by being brainy, Mrs. Wormer said. A girl doesn't get a man by being brainy, Mrs. Wormer said. Look at the film star, for instance, she added, pointing at the silent TV screen where Basmally female was being embraced by a curly actor in the moonlight. You don't think she got him to do that by multiplying figures and she got him to do by multiplying figures at him, do you? Not likely. And now he's going to marry her. You see, if he doesn't, and he's going to live in a mansion with a boardroom and lots of merits. Miss Honey could hardly believe that she was hearing. She had heard the parents like this excitements all over the place, and that their children turned out to be delinquents and dropouts. But it was still a shock to meet a pair of them in the flesh. Matilda's trouble, she said, trying once again, is that she's so far ahead of everyone else around her that it might be worth thinking about some extra kind of private tuition. I seriously believe that she could be brought to university standard in 2 or 3 years with the proper coaching. University, Mr. Wormer shouted, bouncing in his chair. Who wants to go to university, for heaven's sake? or they learn there is a bad habit. That is not true, Miss Honey said. If you had a heart attack this minute and had to call a doctor, the doctor would be a university graduate. If you got sued for selling someone a rotten second-hand car, you have to get a lawyer, and he'd be a university graduate too. Do not despise clever people, Mr. Wormwood, but I can see we are not going to agree. I'm sorry I burst in you like this, Miss Honey rose from her chair and walked out of the room. Mr. Wormwood followed her to the first door and said, Good of you to come, Miss Hawks. Or is it Miss Harris? It's neither, Miss Honey said. But let it go. And away she went. It's Miss Honey, not Miss Hawks or Miss Harris. Bye!